A lot of what we find depicted in fiction, irrespective of the fiction, I mean, today, more commonly in movies, but certainly also in literature, run that boundary between what's human and what's not human. But more than that, what types of things are able to sustain criteria that we as humans hold to be valuable for our definition of a person. Probably one of the most useful morality plays of recent years has been the Blade Runner series. Certainly the first one, I think, did a nice job. And then the second one carried along from there, moving along the trajectory of various characteristics that a human being or a living organism might be able to then sustain, prompt, and even propagate. If we look at the first Blade Runner, for example, one of the things that was really axiomatic to that was, did it have enough of a neurological set of activities to be able to get all the checks in the relative block that we hold to be dear, to say these are neurocentric criteria for neurological functions that give rise to mind, consciousness, self-consciousness, the capability to suffer. These are all things that we hold near and dear as characteristics that fit the qualities that we regard to be viable for a person. So if we think of the idea of a person, would this replicant then fulfill that? Does it have those characteristics? In other words, does it not only express these things objectively that we can see, but does it have that inner subjective set of states that we value? Is it enough like us, where we then say, it's a thing, it's a person? And what it's really doing is asking a question. And I think the question is not just a fictional question, it's certainly a question that arises from the neural and cognitive sciences. If, in fact, the neural and cognitive sciences over the years have provided us increasing amount of information and understanding of the processes and functions of other brains, non-human brains, brains at various points of development, literally from conception to grave, brains that have been changed, damaged, altered in some way. The question then becomes, well, how much brain is necessary to do those things that we hold to be sacrosanct for personhood? That's a nice way of saying how much brain is necessary to be a mind. And if in fact I change the brain, and we say that the brain and the mind in some way is the substrate of the self, well, how much can I change that brain and that self is the self no longer? And of course, could I then modify that brain in such a way so as to be able to direct what that mind, that consciousness, that experience, that self, that identity could be? These are not just fictional questions. Certainly, we see them portrayed in fiction like Blade Runner and a host of other films and literature. But they're also real questions that relate back to how we use various forms of neuroscience and neurotechnology to literally treat and affect the brain. What are we doing with regard to defining what is normal and abnormal? What are we defining what is functional and dysfunctional? What are we defining and how are we making the definitions as to what is treatment and what is enablement or optimization or enhancement? How far should we enhance? And what happens to the idea of not just the human, but also the person if we enhance? And if we don't go in that direction, but look in the other direction, when we use the neuroscientific information and knowledge that we have at hand, what does that tell us about non-human others? Other species, for example, that are capable of these neurological functions, perhaps not identically, nor should they be identical, but how do we regard them? Of course, this is very provocative. It's where science fiction meets science fact.